Good morning and welcome to Rising. We've got a great show for you today. Robbie, what do we have?
Our all-star panelists, Olayemi Olurin and Rena Shah, will weigh in on talks of another economic stimulus package, and Kim Ives will discuss the arrest made in connection to the assassination of Haitian President Jovenel Moïse, who was killed last July. Plus, A.C. Thompson discusses a new documentary on extremism and politics.
Today marks the anniversary of last year's deadly assault on the Capitol. Our colleagues here at The Hill were brave enough to share their own firsthand accounts from January 6, 2021. Let's watch.
I was standing with my colleague, Mike Lillis, at that time, and he points out, he says, look, there's police officers running at us, running down the staircase.
And the cops turned and started running towards us, and they said, "Get the hell out of here."
And they screamed out to us, "You guys need to run. You guys need to run."
And we said, well, if the cops are running, then we should probably do the same thing.
That was a moment where survival mode sort of kicked in and your adrenaline kicked in. And although we wanted to sort of document as much as we could what was happening, that's certainly why I pulled out my iPhone and started recording. There's a moment when you know that it's time to cut and run, and that was certainly that moment.
I don't think I'd ever seen so many people, people that I wouldn't expect to look as terrified as they were. You see people in such a different capacity of just kind of that moment of panic and how everybody's trying to rush out and everybody kind of trying to comfort each other.
That day, we only saw a sliver of what was actually happening outside of the Capitol. And it really did take one day, 1 week, 1 month to process that event.
People went through so much worse than I did that day. It was scary, but I came out pretty unscathed. But it's, the amount of chaos and the amount of, I feel like the lack of preparation to handle something like that happening, I think was pretty shocking. I think looking at the footage afterwards and as more videos come out, seeing what the Capitol Police dealt with inside that building, inside the building in those tunnels. And it's, I think I knew it was bad while it was happening, but I think seeing that, the magnitude of it was even more intense than I had realized at the time.
A new Axios Momentive poll shows that fewer than 6 in 10 Americans say President Biden legitimately won the 2020 election, a share that hasn't changed since a similar poll conducted last year by Axios. According to the new stats, a majority of Americans actually expect something like the attack on the Capitol to happen again in the next few years. Just half surveyed said they have faith in American democracy. I don't particularly expect something like this to happen again. It was a fairly freak occurrence. If Trump's president again, who knows? But the sitting president first, denying that he lost the election, and then kind of, giving vocal support to his angriest and most irate, a mob of those supporters, to do something. I know he didn't tell them to be violent, etc., but he did, fire them up. That is a pretty freak occurrence that doesn't seem likely to me to ever repeat itself, I guess, unless Trump's president.
All they would need is slightly stronger security around the building. Mm-hmm. If what we're talking about is a repeat of a precise type of performance like this. In the days leading up to January 6th, there were a number of members of Congress who were like, look, it looks like something really serious could happen on January 6th, and we're gauging that based on the fact that people are saying that something very serious is going to happen on January 6th, and that they're going to stop the steal, and they're going to storm the Capitol. And for a variety of reasons which are still being explored, some of them related to the Metro Police not wanting to kind of repeat the Lafayette Square gas, the tear gassing that was so embarrassing there, and some of it related to we'll figure it all out.
Right.
But for whatever reason, it was basically like
they were not
business
prepared.
as usual.
Right. This is my favorite category of, you're supposed to, if you see something, say something. People said something, and then the authorities just didn't plan for it at all. That's great. So yeah, I was there on January 6th, a year ago. I was covering it. I was outside. I saw and again, it's 99% of the people there were engaged in First Amendment protected political protest, and that was fine. But then some people smashed the windows. They went in. There was tear gas everywhere. I got tear gas. It was horrible. I mean, there's like a cloud of it. I couldn't get out of the way of it. It was a pretty horrific spectacle, and the right has tried to kind of downplay, I think, how bad it was. Right, we don't need to. It wasn't a planned insurrection. It wasn't. Our government was not threatened, but it was pretty bad. We should definitely not have that happen again.
And there were a lot of powerful people who wanted to threaten the government.
Right.
Who tried. They had a plan, and they tried to execute it.
They failed miserably at every turn because they're idiots.
I forget who says it, but there's somebody in the New Woodward book who says, was this an attempted coup? Was this an insurrection? It's like asking, is an 80-yard field goal attempt a field goal attempt?
Right.
And it's like, well, yeah. I mean,
this was like a 1,000-yard field goal attempt.
Right. Is a 1,000-yard field goal attempt a field goal? They snapped the ball.
Yeah.
The guy kicked it. He was trying to put it through the uprights, but there was just no way it was ever going to happen. Now
it's like me trying to kick a field goal from 1,000 yards.
So is that really a field goal attempt, or is it just Robbie swinging his foot at a football?
I think it was
a very metaphysical kind of question.
And like that, it was very embarrassing for everyone involved.
Right. Although people get better at kicking field goals over time, so that's the worry. Metaphor. But the reality is that if an election. Well, elections have been stolen in the past in different ways. It's like the
1960 B. Hayes.
1960 election, the 2000 election, Rutherford B. Hayes. But those were stolen within the rules.
Right.
Like everybody was trying to steal the elections.
Right.
And one party stole them.
John Quincy Adams.
John Quincy Adams. Right, but they're all within the rules that are set up as we understand them. This sacking the Capitol and trying to get the electors thrown back and throw it to the House, that's a new one. No, that's not how we steal elections around here. And so the fear is that they're going to have a more sophisticated way of doing it next time that will be not within norms of stealing elections.
Right.
Or just have the Supreme Court steal it or whatever.
Yeah, I don't think that. We'll see.
Right.
We will see.
Right. That there's a precedent for, although they say it's not a precedent.
The 2000 one.
Right.
Yeah, the 2001 was real close. Yeah, if there was an election that close again, anything would be on the table.
Which there will be, of course.
Well, close enough to be a few thousand votes in a single state where they really screwed up the actual ballots. Yeah, if that happens again, our country is doomed. Then we are going to have another civil war. But
so in other words, we're going to...
It's good that election happened at a time of just, everyone being kind of much more chill, like the end of the 90s. Everyone's, in a good mood. There weren't actually these huge, partisan differences between the two parties.
The Brooks Brothers riot had to be, orchestrated with, Republican interns.
Yeah. Well, if we repeated how close the election was in 2000 with the stakes of the elections of now, that would be a disaster.
Yes.
So...
And then, meanwhile, speaking of violent confrontations, the Central Asian country Kazakhstan has seen a string of violence in recent days. Yesterday, protesters forcibly stormed airports, government buildings, and set fire to the city's main administrative office, according to local media on the ground there. There were also reports of clashes with police and military and a nationwide internet blackout. Local media reported 8 police dead and more than 300 officers injured, while dozens of citizens were killed in the attacks and hundreds injured by the authorities. Kazakhstan asked the kind of Russian version of NATO to send troops in, and they actually did green light those troops. So those troops are now in Kazakhstan, and we have reports this morning of dozens of protesters being killed. So I don't think we've heard the last of this because people don't take kindly usually to their own president calling in,
asking for a foreign army to come crack down
in and
on,
then start killing people in the streets.
Yeah, I mean, this is.
And we'll talk about this next week. Right now, it's really hard to know what's going on. You know, what is the role of the U.S. in stoking some of this unrest? What is the role of Russia? What's been the role of the natural gas prices? You know, where is this headed and who's involved? And we really don't have enough answers yet.
Yeah, we really don't know. We don't want to see, obviously, more unrest in that part of the world, any part of the world, but
we don't want to see
instability.
More death, but
don't want to see. Yeah. Oh, you want to see a little bit of unrest.
I mean, I'm not going to tell people whether to be restful or not.
Okay, people should be well rested, and not violent.
Yes.
Yes.
I don't want to see
fire. I don't like seeing things on fire. You're like,
sometimes.
You're a Windows don't feel pain kind of guy, huh?
I mean, I don't know enough about the situation on the ground to say, you know, what was justified and what wasn't, and who's behind it. That's what I guess the way I would put it.
Well, we will look for more information about that, and I'm sure talk more about that on the show next week. But for right now, we'll tell you what's on our radars coming up next.